taking the time to speak with us, Drew. Really appreciate it. What was it like watching everything back last night? Because again, I talked to a lot of people when they do watch those back. Sometimes it's like deja vu, like all those feelings start coming back to them.
Yeah, actually, that's a good question, especially for me, John, because I do feel like I've had a very difference watching the show
Right.
than is the way what's conventionally described. Because for me, it doesn't really feel like I'm on TV. I'm watching this thing, and it has serious ramifications on my life,
Right.
to be sure. But like, I don't really like relive it in the same way that it has been much vaunted, much described.
Yeah.
That kind of vicariousness. That being said, last night definitely a tough episode. They came for me. Everybody did. D did. Julie did. Jake did. The editors did. So I'm kind of recovering from my bombardment.
Now we saw Kelly. She was sitting on a, on a very animated jury, and she's like, "Well, he's pissed. Were you pissed, Drew, or how? What were you feeling at the time? I would think you were feeling a bit more like, man, I got."
I definitely was feeling like that. I wasn't mad. I was completely mortified and humiliated because I knew how confident I had been like all
Right,
day. And then
right.
also just right before tribal, and then also during tribal to do some of the answers, I'd had to really, I had started to really have second thoughts about the way things are going. And this is something people have vouched for me on. Like Austin will tell you this, Julie will tell you this. This is not like revisionism.
Yeah.
Um, but so basically, when I point is when I got booted, I wasn't mad. I was embarrassed.
Right.
But I did feel like that, and maybe like the CU where you gotta take your pot shots when you can. I get it.
Now, looking back, I mean, one of the things that you rallied everybody. I guess you made yourself a big threat because you were managed to convince everyone that we needed to target Julie. Now, where did that all come from? Because I was expecting someone to make a move eventually, but I was like, okay, are they going to do it now, or are they going to wait until we weed out some more people? What brought that to the forefront that you said, like, look, we got to make a move now on her?
For sure. So, Reba had a codified agreement that we would turn on each other at 6. There was no
Oh,
illusion we'd go to the end together.
right.
That being said, when Bruce left early, a vote earlier than I thought he would, it kind of
Yeah.
opened up the floodgates a little bit. And so you take stock of the land and you say, okay, who's a threat? I felt like I would probably get a lot of strategic credit from the jury.
Okay.
Um, and so what would stand out for me is number one, as people I would maybe be wary of, is really strong social games, which everyone in Reba had.
Yeah.
Dee, Julie, Austin did. But then also maybe independent strategic moves. And I felt that Julie had those in a way that maybe Austin and Dee did not, because Julie had worked really hard to cultivate this relationship with Bruce, you know? And then also Julie had been really making final three plans with people that were coming to my attention. And so if I'm hearing about them, I imagine how many there are that I'm not hearing about. So that kind of elevated her to be a concern in my eyes. And then of course after the idol play, it's like boom, you're interstellar, you're up to the stars.
Now, obviously, you can't see everything that goes on. I mean, there's a lot of armchair critics, but again, we get to see the entire picture, and you guys don't until the episode plays. So, how did you feel when you saw Drew, warning Dee, and then Dee warning Julie?
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know, because the thing was, we kind of knew that Julie knew, or we had a strong suspicion that Julie knew because,
Right.
um, they had a long conversation on the beach, and I think Julie overheard or saw some of it, and probably not overheard, but basically the dynamic changed palpably around Cam, so it was not that shocking.
Right.
Um, we certainly didn't know that D had told Julie explicitly. It's a great move on D's part. Really props
Yeah.
for that. Um, but it was I don't know. It didn't seem like as big of a deal out there playing as people have taken it to
Yeah.
be in watching. So maybe an oversight on our parts.
Now, obviously, the last few episodes they've been hyping up this showmance between, Austin and Dee, and we haven't seen much of that, up until this point. You were on the island, you were with them 24/7. What was your take on everything that's going on? Because again, we're just seeing this now. Was this always a thing? Did you suspect something? Because again, that probably would send off other warning bells in your head saying, like,
Yeah.
am I his number one? Or
No, John, listen, I mean, I think that you haven't seen it because we haven't seen it, right?
Right.
Like, this was an unusual showman's and then it was late breaking. It
Yeah.
really only kind of appeared at the end of the game. And as players who are not in the showman's,
Yeah.
who are third wheeling, like Katara at the reward and then me around camp, you're kind of like, what the heck? Like,
Yeah.
where did this come from? Now all my plans are overturned, and how do I recalibrate and reconfigure? But no, to get back to the showman specifically, it happened. It they always had a good rapport, and they're two very attractive, like young people. They're both Signal. It makes sense.
Yeah.
Um, but it was just a warehouse full of fireworks, and
Yeah.
as soon as some sparks were there, it blew up immediately.
Right. Now you played a pretty cerebral game, but you also played a very surprisingly a very honest game with people. I mean, you had that one-on-one with Jake where you were quite
Mm.
frank about how you felt about him. Same with Brando when he came to you about forging an alliance. You were very upfront and honest with him. Was that always your approach to the game, that you were going to be that forthright with people and kind of like not beat around the bush with them?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of was. I do consider some of the lying in Survivor to be played out, right? Like, most of these lies are totally unnecessary. It's just people trying to be tricky, trying to delude themselves that like they're playing some like social mastery game.
Yeah.
Who am a very logical guy, I would much rather lay all the pieces out,
Right.
unclothed. Like let's get rid of the trappings and the pretenses. Let's just say it how it is, and then maneuver within that game because I think it allows for much sharper strategic decision making. So that was always a goal I had. I was never going to lie about my career. I mean, God knows why I need to, although it's a big trend. Um, yeah,
Now you worked closely with Austin throughout the entire game. What was it like, one, working with him? Because you guys were very successful. And one thing we don't know is, why didn't he ever ask for the idol back? Did he tell you?
for sure. So working with Austin,
Yeah.
great, best decision I made the whole game.
Yeah.
We had such a solid rapport, and even when in the few moments we had strategic differences,
Yeah.
we always ironed out to an agreement. And so he there, John, a lot of people come off Survivor and they talk about having trust issues. They talk about having worries about, like if they can rely on people. I didn't really have that in part because I relied on Austin so completely and entirely.
Right.
The idea that he would have betrayed me was the farthest thing in the world. And so, in terms of asking for that idol, the idol back, um, we gave it to Julie. We thought it was the right decision at the time.
Yeah.
I'll take accountability as well,
Right.
for sure. But then the next day, or maybe 2 days after, but soon after, I was
Yeah.
talking to her about it, and I just said Austin's idol, and she corrected me. She said my idol. So then I
Oh.
was like, okay, well, like here we are, like marking our territory, laying claim, and it's kind of a little bit of that sunk cost fallacy, John, because it's
Yeah.
like I throw away this strong foursome based on greed, inheritance, whatever, or do I ride it a little longer and deal with this problem to come? So basically, Julie recognized that she had the idol. Austin already had an idol. He didn't need two. It was a valuable source of agency in her game, although potentially it raised her threat level too high to a point she didn't want
Right.
it to be.
Right.
Um, but yeah,
So also, I was talking again. A lot of survivors, again, when they go on the
mhm,
show, they see themselves reflected back, almost like a mirror. I talked with Bruce about this and his
yeah.
feelings and a lot of things he had to work through. Um, having gone through the experience, how has it changed you as a person, or has it changed you at all?
It's tough. I mean, like being out in the primitive, and then watching it back on TV and interacting with fans definitely changed my philosophical opinions, even my political opinions to a degree.
Right.
But in terms of who I am, I'm not sure because John, I did feel like certain aspects of my edit were a little ungenerous, and then certain aspects were really, really fair.
Right.
Um, and so you want to internalize the critique without overcorrecting.
Right.
Um, and like if I took all my lesson, like from this most recent episode, let's take this for example. Okay, valuable lesson. Tone down the pride, tone down the hubris. Be less confident. Um, but I don't know. Like, did I really have as bad a social game as it sometimes seemed? It's unclear to me.
Right.
And I think if I were to o- over overcorrect based on that lesson, I might end up in some dire straits. So it's a balance, and I think Bruce probably said it just as much to you. Like, okay,
Yeah.
like I need to take into consideration that the way I'm treating people is not the right way, but I also need to kind of fact check that with
Yeah.
my family and those who love me.
Yeah, well, that's it. And same thing in Bruce's case, I brought up to him that may be a generational thing where, you know, uh,
Absolutely.
people of my generation, when you come from Generation X, it's more like, don't sugarcoat things, tell people exactly what it is. And with other generations, that can be a triggering or a touch off point. So I think maybe some of that was part of Bruce's experience, not all, but I think there was that kind of difference that maybe he couldn't relate to them on that level, right? And yeah, he had to work through a lot of things himself. And you're mentioning that about your edit, and I was going to ask you specifically because I asked this to all the survivors, but again, we only get to see a really small portion, a small glimpse of what you go through every day in your experience. Is there anything about your edit, whether it was a moment, a depiction, a bond, a strategic moment that you wish they would have shown more of or shown at all?
Yeah, I mean, just to circle back to Bruce though for a second, because
Yeah,
he's a great guy. I think obviously just from how you're talking about it, you have some affinity, appreciation. The people who started with Bruce weren't really great fans of him, but everyone who met
right.
Bruce, like come merge, loved Bruce. We really liked Bruce,
Yeah,
even if we were against him strategically. So I do think he just was an unfortunate situation where he got the wrong group of people to start,
mhm,
or the wrong dynamic crystallized. As for things I wish that they had shown, you know, you got to be thankful for what you get, to be sure.
yeah,
I don't really have any like personal or strategic moments that um I do think that the Kelly vote required a lot more of like kind of fine tuning than was
right,
let on. It was such a packed episode, and the outcome was so surprising that you don't want to spoil that.
right.
So it was a little unfortunate to see like, you know, it's like you're a painter and you have these masterful outlines of like what it's going to be, right? And then it all just gets flattened with the paint. That's how it felt a little bit.
Now, again, you were famous on the show for putting things like you just did very succinctly. If you had to look at your survivor's experience, how would you put it succinctly?
Survivor is a one of a kind adventure in a world that doesn't really allow for adventure anymore.
Right,
And I think that is the chief selling point that you see the show now attracting so many people who are not really interested in reality TV, who have successful careers,
that's
who are
true.
not
Yeah,
trying to like become an influencer because it offers an adventure that doesn't exist anymore. That being said, watching the show back can be tough, and interacting with the fans, especially if you are a little bit disliked, a little bit villainous, it can be very tough.
yeah.
So I think that ambiguity is a good word to describe the experience because the experience itself is great. The airing, the outcome, the interaction can be a little challenging.
Now, obviously, you were one of the most cerebral players this season. You're part of the jury now. I know you can't exactly say who you voted for, but what I want to know is, again, because this will be very interesting to me compared to the others I've spoke to. What are some of the factors that you went through and some of the things you thought about when you were going to cast your vote? What things did you weigh in your mind?
For sure. So I'll just speak generally about how I, appreciate the relationships because that's kind of what you base your decision off of, isn't it?
Right,
But for me, obviously, I would want a deserving strategic winner. But at the same time, my brand really has not been game bot. It's almost been like honesty, emotion,
right,
loyalty, connection. So similarly, it would be difficult probably for me to stomach going to the end with people who I didn't care about deeply on like a personal level. And that's part of why I wanted to go to the end with Austin and Dee because I really
right.
valued them. And so if I were to prognosticate on like a final jury decision, I think that those would be the two factors that would weigh in.
Yeah. Well, thanks very much, Drew, for taking the time to talk to us today. Really appreciate it. It was great watching you play the game again. I love a strategic game. I loved your strategic mind throughout the entire show. And
Thank you, man. I appreciate
and,
it.
and who knows? I mean, I've talked to a lot of people and their survivor journey continued, so you never know.
Well, we'll see. But thanks so much, John. It was great to talk to you.
You too. Take care and have a great day.